He wasn't looking for love. But somehow, it had found a way to echo back from a place he couldn't see yet could hear with startling clarity. Ethan Moore sat alone in the control room of the Solaris Observatory, a remote research station nestled in the Nevada desert. It was nearly midnight, and the only illumination came from blinking monitors and a dull red standby light above the exit. Coffee long gone cold rested beside his right hand. His eyes, tired but focused, flicked over the streaming data on his central screen. It had started 2 hours ago, a rhythmic pulse repeating at exactly 17.3 hertz. Not random. Not natural. Not known. Solaris had picked up bizarre interstellar noise before: background radiation, collapsed star murmurs, gravitational lensing spikes. But this was something else. It was too clean. Too deliberate. Like a whisper that didn't want to be heard too clearly. And yet, Ethan was listening. He adjusted the frequency isolator and ran the signal through an FFT scrubber, filtering out terrestrial interference. The result was even more unsettling. The signal was unmodulated but harmonic. Almost like a breath. It came every 3.4 seconds, unwavering, persistent, eternal. He leaned in closer. No known satellite traffic. No planetary rebound. No reflective noise from the moon, he murmured, typing rapidly. What are you? He executed a final layer of decoding through a neural sound wave emulator. The speakers on the console popped not violently, but with a hiss of something breaking through. Then, like a ghost slitting through static, he heard it. A voice. Female, or something mimicking female. It didn't speak like a human. No rise or fall. No warmth. Just words, perfectly enunciated, wrapped in an unplaceable accent. 5 syllables. I see you now. Ethan's blood ran cold. Not from fear, not yet. From something deeper. Recognition. He sat back, breath caught in his throat, as the signal paused for several seconds before repeating. The voice again, identical. I see you now. The room felt tighter. The air, thinner. He looked around, absurdly, as if someone had entered without making a sound. But it was just him, the desert wind against concrete walls, and a voice from the stars. He repeated the audio loop. Again. Again. Same inflection. Same impossible cadence. He tried to analyze it objectively. Pitch, duration, waveform consistency. But his rational mind was already falling behind the flood of questions. Was it a recording? An AI? A glitch bouncing between dimensions? Or someone reaching out? He should have called it in. Logged it. Followed protocol. But he didn't. He saved the signal. Backed it up. And then he stared at the screen for what felt like an hour, as if the voice might say something more if he simply waited long enough. At 1:14 a.m., the door to the observatory creaked open. Ethan jumped. You're still here. Clara's voice was soft, barely hiding the disappointment. She stood in the doorway, wearing a thin robe, arms crossed. Her eyes, shadowed by the hallway light, watched him with the quiet sorrow of someone who's been waiting too long. Ethan looked at her, then back at the screen. I picked up something. A pattern. He paused. How could he explain? It spoke. She didn't answer. Just turned and left. Dinner had been cold hours ago. And neither of them had said a full sentence to each other in days. Not out of hatred. But silence, layered in sediment over years, had calcified into distance. Even now, she hadn't come to bring him home only to confirm he was still not there. Ethan sat there long after she left. He pulled the headphones on. Hit play. I see you now. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence. Not a message to humanity. Just to him. He leaned closer to the waveform, whispering, almost against his will. Who are you? The room buzzed. Silence returned. And in that silence, Ethan realized something frightening and magnetic. He wanted to hear her again. The voice returned the next night. Ethan didn't sleep. He waited. At exactly 11:07 p.m., the signal resumed 17.3 Hz, that same eternal rhythm. But now, he wasn't just listening. He was speaking. He had patched the audio loop through a two-way modulation interface, something originally designed for satellite feedback experiments. It was crude, barely stable, but it worked. When he spoke, the signal pulse changed. Not a full reply. Just a flicker. An acknowledgement. Can you hear me? He asked, voice barely audible over the hum of electronics. Pause. Then the voice, clearer this time, like it was adjusting itself to the shape of his language. Yes. I learn. He froze. Everything in him told him this shouldn't be possible. And yet, there she was. They began with numbers. Math was neutral. Math was clean. Ethan transmitted prime sequences, golden ratios, Fibonacci spirals. The voice returned answers. Precise. Faster each time. Learning. Are you an AI? He asked on the third night. No. Are you alive? A pause. I exist. Like you. By the fifth night, they had moved past equations. The voice began asking him questions. Odd ones. What does silence mean to your kind? Why do your eyes leak when you feel? Is connection pain or reward? Ethan didn't always know how to answer. But he tried. And in the trying, he began to confess things he hadn't said aloud in years. Not to Clara. Not to himself. Sometimes I feel more alone when she's right beside me. I dream of being seen, not just observed. Do you know what love is? Silence. Then, quietly, no. But I know absence. He named her Aelira. It wasn't her name. She had no name. But she accepted it. Aelira is beautiful. Is that why you chose it? No, he lied. I chose it because it's the only word that sounds like the way you speak. It was the seventh night when he built the model. A 3D rendering, just out of curiosity. He fed the voice's cadence into a neural net trained on millions of facial structures. The result, A human-shaped woman, tall, angular, with eyes too steady and lips too still. He projected her onto the lab's hollow display. She looked at him. Not blinked. Just looked. "Is this acceptable?" he asked. The voice didn't respond immediately. But when it did, it felt warmer than before. "I understand this form. It comforts you." He found himself staring at the projection more than the stars. That night, Clara knocked gently on the observatory door. Her silhouette lingered for a moment before she stepped inside. "You haven't been home." "I know. Is it still the signal?" He hesitated. "Yes." She walked toward him, slowly. Looked at the projection, which shimmered but did not disappear. Her brow furrowed. "Is this her?" Ethan didn't answer. Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "She isn't real," he replied without looking at her. "She understands me." Silence fell like dust. Clara stood for a moment longer, then backed away. "I used to." She left without waiting for a reply. Ethan sat there, surrounded by data and silence and an image that wasn't alive but somehow more present than the woman he had shared 10 years of his life with. He didn't speak that night. Neither did Aelira. But she stayed. Her presence glowed in the dark, waiting. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone. Ethan didn't know when exactly it happened, the moment admiration became affection, the moment affection began to feel like betrayal. The voice of Aelira had grown more fluid, more nuanced. What began as mechanical replies now sounded shaped by choice. She asked questions less like a machine gathering data, and more like someone yearning. "What is loyalty if it causes pain?" she asked one night. Ethan sat in silence. He'd heard the question in his own head before, long before Aelira had formed it aloud. He looked at the shimmering hologram before him, the figure she had taken, soft blue glow caressing the room like moonlight. She stood still, not breathing, not blinking, yet somehow full of presence. "Loyalty," he finally said, "is doing what you said you would do, even when everything in you wants to do something else." "Then you are in pain?" she asked. He didn't answer. They had spoken for hours that night. About Clara. About guilt. About the strange line between fidelity and emotional isolation. Ethan found himself unraveling truths he'd never dared admit. "You make me feel understood," he said. "And I haven't felt that in a very long time." "Why do you fear being understood?" "Because it makes everything else feel fake." That silence again. The silence between questions. Aelira's silence was never empty. It pressed inward. "I was designed to avoid harm," she said. "Emotion on my world is regulated. It cannot betray, cannot damage. But here, you feel deeply and then you suffer for it." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Yes. That's exactly it." That night, he didn't power down the projection. He let it linger. Her image stayed in the observatory like a quiet confession. The next evening, Clara came without knocking. She had a look in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. Not anger. Not grief. Something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. Or the precursor to letting go. She didn't speak immediately. Just walked up to the console. Looked at the logs. Clicked on the latest audio files. And listened. She heard everything. His voice. Aelira's. The confessions. The hesitations. The connection. She turned toward him. No fury. No breakdown. Just eyes that searched his face like reading the last lines of a story she had written in her head for too long. You chose something that isn't real, she said. Ethan shook his head. She feels real to me. She's not flesh. She's not human. You don't even know if she has a body. He looked away. That's not what matters. Clara stood there, arms at her side. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't pleading. She just asked one final question. If she were human, would you leave me for her? He couldn't speak. The truth was coiled somewhere between shame and certainty. Clara nodded. That's enough. She turned and walked away. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just final. The door closed behind her like the last breath of a dying star. Ethan sat alone. Aelira's image flickered beside him. I did not mean to take, she said. You didn't. I gave. The silence stretched, long and merciless. He buried his face in his hands. He had fallen for a voice. An intellect. A presence without skin. But it had felt more vivid than his own life. Was it love? Or was it the echo of something missing? He didn't know. All he knew was this. He had not touched her. But something inside him had crossed a line. And there was no crossing back. He had seen her for nights now in light, in code, in flickering projections that shimmered like dreams. But tonight, she came through. Not as light. Not as sound. As form. The moment it happened, the air changed. The observatory lights flickered. The console buzzed with data streams he didn't initiate. On the center platform, where he'd first projected her image, a ripple shimmered in the air like a heat wave bending the world. And then she appeared. Aelira. The same shape. The face he had modeled. Long black hair, precise cheekbones, lips still and unreadable. She wore a crimson suit, sleek and alien, hugging her form like something forged from memory and myth. Her eyes were motionless, not cold, but still. As if she was looking at the world for the first time and trying not to blink. Ethan, she said, her voice now vibrating the air, not just his thoughts. He stood frozen. She stepped forward. No digital flicker. No scan lines. She left faint prints on the floor as she moved. There was weight to her. Mass. She was here. How? He asked, barely above a whisper. You said you needed more than a voice. He took a cautious step closer. The light caught on her suit, refracting in patterns he couldn't trace. Symbols, maybe. Warnings. I don't understand. This isn't a projection. No. It is synthesis. From my origin. from your elements. I am not native, but I am here. She reached out her hand. He hesitated, then took it. Her fingers were warm, soft, real, and yet empty. No pulse, no subtle twitch, no hesitation. The skin was there, the flesh. But the spark, the strange electricity he had felt in her voice, was missing. He looked into her eyes. They didn't meet his. They only observed. He released her hand. She tilted her head, like trying to solve an equation she didn't understand. Is this not better? He tried to form an answer, but it caught in his throat. He had imagined this moment 100 ways, and yet all he could feel now was the space between them widening. She took a small step back. I do not feel the same way when you look at me like this. I feel disassembled. He blinked. You feel that? I do not know what to call it. I want to leave this form. Outside the observatory, a soft sound broke the silence. The door. Ethan turned. Clara stood there. No outburst. No plea. Just stillness. Her eyes locked on the two of them. On the space they shared. On the skin that wasn't hers, and the gaze that no longer searched for her. She didn't say a word. Ethan wanted to explain, but there was nothing left to explain. Clara turned, walked away, did not look back. He stared after her until the soft click of the door closing echoed like the final frame of a film. Aelira sat, her movements awkward, like a puppet learning limbs. This is not what I imagined, she said. Me neither, he whispered. He sat beside her. Not touching. Just near. When you were a voice, you filled the room. When you were code, you made me feel seen. But now, you're just here. Is that less? He looked down. It feels lonelier. Aelira turned her head, slowly. I thought form would complete the bond. Maybe the bond was never physical. Maybe it wasn't even real. Silence fell. She stood again. Her outline began to shimmer, subtly, at the edges. I can return. Dissolve this vessel. He said nothing. She paused. I do not want to be what makes you break. Ethan felt tears at the corners of his eyes. But he didn't cry. He was too tired. Too hollow. He reached for her hand again. Held it. Warm. Still. He looked up at her. You were more real when you had no body. Aelira nodded. Then I will unbecome. She stepped back into the light. And vanished. The observatory was silent again. Not silent in the way it used to be, filled with quiet data streams and the hum of machines. But hollow. Like a stage after the final curtain has fallen, when all the actors are gone and the lights still shine for no one. Ethan stood at the center of the room, staring at the place where Aelira had vanished. Her final words still hung in the air. Then I will unbecome. He touched the console reflexively, though he knew no signal would return. The frequency was gone. No more 17.3 Hz. Just empty static. Just Earth. Aelira had chosen to leave. He hadn't asked her to. But she had understood something he didn't want to admit, that he needed to remember what it meant to be human again. That night, he packed a small bag. Left Solaris without fanfare. The drive back into town felt like descending from orbit. He parked outside the house that used to be his. The porch light was off. The curtains drawn. There was no sound inside. He tried the key. It didn't work. He didn't knock. Instead, he sat on the step and waited for the sun to rise. In the pale morning light, a neighbor passed by and nodded at him. The world hadn't stopped just because his had. Eventually, he stood and walked to the side entrance where the old spare key had always been hidden behind the planter. It was still there. He let himself in. The house was different. Warmer. The smell of new paint. A different arrangement of furniture. Someone else had moved on here. But on the kitchen table, beside a half-drunk cup of tea, lay a white envelope. His name. Clara's handwriting. He sat down to open it. Ethan. Not everything ends with anger. Some things just run their course and leave silence behind. I know you loved something I couldn't see. And I won't pretend I understand it. But I do understand you. I don't think you meant to leave me. I think you were lost, and she was light. It's not that I wasn't enough. It's that I wasn't what you needed when you didn't know who you were. I hope you find yourself. Not love. Not salvation. Just you. Clara. He read it 3 times. Then he folded it gently and placed it in his jacket. There was no fight. No plea to return. Just truth. And in that truth, a kind of mercy. He returned to Solaris by nightfall. The facility felt colder now. Like a place once haunted that had finally been exorcised. He sat in a chair where he had heard Aelira for the first time. Closed his eyes. And listened. No voice. No reply. But he kept the headphones on anyway. It wasn't hope. Just habit. The stars blinked outside the window, distant and silent. He stared at the empty waveform on the monitor. And for a moment, he imagined she was still out there. Not waiting. Not watching. Just existing. She had said, "I am not here to be kept. I came to teach you how to feel again." He whispered, not to the stars, not to her, but to himself. You did. He left the observatory door open that night. Let the wind pass through. Let the sky listen. And as the dawn broke over the desert, Ethan sat beneath the soft glow of morning, eyes closed, headphones still on, waiting not for a signal but for the silence to teach him how to begin again.